So a true gentleman has a generous heart. Why do we have to be generous with our money? Is generosity with time enough? And if so, how much time? And what about generosity with having children?
There's a lot to unpack, but we're going to go into all of these things and more in our episode today.
So before we start our episode, we'd like to start with the handshake. And the handshake today is magnanimity. Say that 10 times fast. But practice magnanimity is really important. What is magnanimity? Magnanimity is greatness of spirit. It is not treating others with meanness or pettiness. It is viewing others rightly with the dignity that God has given them. And it presents itself in many different ways. It can present itself when a waiter is helping us at a restaurant and we decide to use their first name, not ignoring them. It can present itself when somebody apologizes to us and they don't really need to, say when you're waiting in a long line at a grocery store or something along those lines and the cashier's like, I'm so sorry for that wait. Then it's an opportunity to be grateful, an opportunity to be generous. So in general with magnanimity, it is treating others as they deserve to be treated, not treating them as if they're beneath you because they aren't.
The world really tells us that what's in it for us is the only thing that matters. Our needs, our wants, our desires. I mean, how many times have you seen advertisements where they say things like, buy this product or enjoy this experience, you deserve it.
That's right.
And that's really the message that the world gives us, is that it's all about you, it's all about your needs, your wants, and satisfying those above all, even sometimes at the expense of others.
That's right, exactly. The idea of giving to those that are less fortunate than us, or helping those in need, or giving of our time to the lady whose spare tire just popped on the side of the road, are things that are, oh, that was nice, I saw that person doing it. But for us, our time is too consumed and too precious, and we can't give of ourselves in these ways.
Yeah, our mentality can often be, someone else will do it.
Yeah.
Someone with more time, more money, whatever the case might be, they'll be the ones to help someone else. And the temptation can be to just, again, look out for number one, look out for our own needs. But we're really called to be generous throughout Scripture, throughout salvation history. You look at the Old Testament with the Jews, it was part of the law that God gave them to be generous. They were told to tithe, they're commanded to tithe. In fact, they were even commanded to mark off a part of their fields when they were cultivating grain or whatever, to leave a corner of their field for the poor and the needy to come and be able to pick their own grain. So really, we see all throughout Scripture that we are commanded to be generous. Why? Well, because God has been generous with us. God has given us life and all things. So it only makes sense that we should give it to others in return, an imitation of God's generosity.
Yeah, and I would be as bold to say that generosity is a life of purpose and a life of happiness. The generous heart of a man is one that is going to be smiled upon by others, is going to be appreciated by others, and then himself is going to be more united to God, because as you already said, God gives to us generously, always has, always will, and it's our job to give forth to others generously as well.
Yeah, and when Jesus sent out his disciples 2 by 2 in the Gospels, one of the things he said to them was, freely you have received, freely give.
Yeah.
So there's a kind of a connection there between what we've received from God and our own acts of generosity.
Yeah, agreed. So when we're breaking down generosity, I think as all things that we like to do is, let's see what the world presents, or what is the combat that we as gentlemen are having to face when it comes to generosity. Because I think right from our initial nature, right? From our instinct is to possess, our instinct and many times is to control and to have that security, that we desperately want. And so we are often prone to this instinct and to holding on to this instinct. And that's something that we have to work against, right? That's that concupiscence. And I know that if you're not convinced, look at children.
That's what I was just going to say.
Go for it. Yeah, let's talk about children.
No,
yeah.
I mean, no, that is so true. I mean, anyone with children knows the very first thing you hear a child when he learns how to talk is, mine.
That's right.
Don't touch that. That's mine.
That's the
And they get in all kinds of fights about this, but it's that desire to be possessive.
That's right.
Don't share.
That's correct. If they've got a free hand, it needs to be grabbing something else, right? So if there's 5 French fries on the table in front of them, and they try and hold them all, right? And so they're looking to grab them all for a couple years,
Yes.
And that idea to possess, to control that mind, as fathers, I know that in this case, that's our job to work that out of them or order them rightly, but it is that instinct that we all have right from the beginning.
Yeah, and it's really part of our fallen nature in a sense, but the instinct is rooted in a desire for survival and self-preservation, which in and of itself is not wrong. In fact, if we didn't have a survival instinct or a self-preservation instinct, we'd probably be dead, before long, because a baby gets hungry, what do? They cry, because they have that survival instinct that tells them, if I don't cry, I'm going to die.
Right.
And it's the same thing for all of us, but that very quickly can become is a desire for more than enough, more than I need to survive. I need radical abundance to the point where I'm ignoring the needs of others, and I'm solely concerned about not only surviving, but just satisfying every single desire that comes into my mind or heart. Sure. And that can be destructive.
Yeah, exactly. That need for security and that fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
So if you're never taught to trust in God and you're taught to rely on Him and that, have faith, you have nowhere to begin with, right?
Yeah.
So society supports that because it's the only thing they know.
Right.
And the idea is the more you stock up in your 401k, the more you stock up in your portfolio, the better off you will be. We know that we're not promised tomorrow, but what if tomorrow comes and we don't have? So therefore that natural instinct sets in, and we see that a lot. And that's not to say that 401ks and good portfolios and anything like that are bad, but it is the way of the world.
Yeah. Yeah, and speaking of that, I've noticed just whenever times get difficult, fear kicks in a high level. People go to this to extreme. Either they turn into preppers and they're stocking their pantries and, sticking things in, every nook and cranny of their house, or they turn to the government, provide for all of my needs, send me this, send me that. And I don't want to get too political here, but the point is, what are you trusting in? I've been in hard times financially myself in the past, times when, we didn't know how we were going to make it as a couple, as a family. We were just that close to the wire, where we were kind of a hair's breadth away from disaster. And the only thing we could do was call out to God in radical dependence on God. Like, Lord, you have to provide. And of course, at that time, it was awfully stressful.
Yeah.
But in retrospect, that was a very purifying, clarifying time in the sense that it made us very aware that we were radically dependent on God's provision for us as a family. And that's not a bad place to be.
No, it certainly isn't.
And so, once you've kind of been through an experience like that a few times, it's important not to forget that when the prosperous times come.
Yeah.
When God does bless you, or when you do receive that kind of abundance that you've worked for, or whatever, to remember that all comes from God, all is a gift, and the best gifts are the ones that are given.
Yeah, I have a story that comes to mind. related to the world's view of generosity versus generosity seen in God's eyes or seen in God's way. So there was a close friend that was in need of a minivan. So they had a lot of kids, beautiful Catholic family, a lot of kids, but were really in need of a minivan. And my wife was blessed to be working at a large firm that managed a lot of money and people who owned and had and possessed a lot of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, right? So the average salary somewhere like $500,000, the average yearly salary of these household incomes. And she was able to send out an email to a number of those wealthy individuals, just requesting for a GoFundMe for this family that was in need of a minivan. And when she sent that email out, it received zero return. But then when it was sent out to a Catholic network of other families in tough times and hard situations with big families and, you know, penny pinching because out of need and necessity, they all started throwing in $25 and $50 and $100. And so by the grace of God, the family, after a couple months, was able to buy a minivan to actually carry their young family, and we're very appreciative of that generosity. But for my wife and I, it was a very pivotal moment when we realized that we wanted to be those people, the people that even when time is tough, can find the $25 or the $50 or the $100, whatever the case might be, to help. And with our means, hopefully our generosity will grow.
Right.
But if you never practice that, the reverse of that is true. So if greed is your way forward, right? Then that starts small and then begins to grow. And so these individuals that amassed a lot of wealth on a yearly basis couldn't find it anywhere to give at all.
Yeah.
You know, versus those that know people like them, themselves have been in those situations, and then they were able to give generously. And, you know, I think that's the world's view versus God's view. So.
That's right. Yeah, and I remember Mother Teresa telling a story about something very similar. She knew a very poor family in India that was barely surviving. They had a lot of children. I don't remember how many. There was like 8 children or something like that. And they were barely surviving from day to day. And so she finally was able to procure for them a large bag of rice. And the family was so excited. Oh, thank you so much for this big bag of rice. But wait, I'll be right back. And the mother of the family took half of that bag of rice to her neighbor, who she knew was also hungry. And so she immediately, the first thing she did when upon receiving that gift of a bag of rice was to share it with her neighbor, even though they were both dirt poor. And she very easily could have said, well, I'm taking care of my family first. She shared right away. And it's that kind of generosity that we're talking about, where when we realize that all is a gift, then we are that much more likely in gratitude, an act of gratitude, to share with others. And that's the gratitude that God calls us to. And it doesn't have to be a lot. You know, Jesus said, even a cup of cold water given in my name is worth everything. That is, it doesn't have to be grand, massive gestures like the Pharisees, you know, blowing the trumpet and announcing to everyone. But those little quiet gifts, they're worth a tremendous amount in God's eyes.
That's right. And it's not strictly our fault in the affluent society, because marketing is on such a high and the noise is everywhere and everyone's vying for our attention. And everybody wants something from us. Generally, they want your money for less than virtuous reasons, but for reasons of profit, reasons of sale. or they just want your attention.
Right.
And when everybody is grabbing for our attention on all the social media platforms, on all the billboards, on all the radios and TV and Netflix and Amazon Prime and all of these different things, it's very easy to become closed off to the world. Yeah. It's very easy to turn into yourself, and that can be a place of protection, but it can also be a place of allowing ourselves to be turned off to the needs of others, because we just don't want to be asked one more thing.
That's true. Yeah.
So, we're also taught to calculate, right? We're also taught to put a risk analysis on everything.
Yeah.
In school, we do that as school kids. We are, if I'm friends with this group but not friends with this group, how will that help me? If I decide to join band or decide to join choir, is that going to give me my tribe of individuals? And so we're taught to be very selective, and we grow in that, and we calculate that, and we're also looking for that return, right? Yeah. And so I guess an instinct, but we're also looking for that return. And so we are analyzing everything, and we are hoping for the best outcome. And we might not know what tomorrow will bring, so we have to store up now or make sure it's a good investment. And when some of these things come to take our generosity or are looking for our generosity, it's easy to justify, no, I don't think I'm going to give there, right? And I've said it before, is that oftentimes with tithing to, say, church or so, we don't quite know where our money goes.
Right.
So it's easy to pull back, and it's easy to say, well, I'm not quite sure what they're going to do with our money. But we're looking at generosity wrong. We're looking at the heart of man incorrectly.
Right.
But these are the things that we've been raised in our affluent society that are constantly vying for our attention, and we just have to be aware of.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, we talked earlier about the survival instinct that we all have, and like you said, we can often think, well, I'm pretty close to the wire as it is. I can't really spare any extra, which is understandable.
Right.
But when we talk about asking for God's blessing, what you find is there really is, I think, a spiritual law at work that says that when you're generous, God will be generous with you. Yeah. Jesus said, give and it will be given to you. Pressed down, running over. Right. And the metaphor there he's talking about is that you give a little bit, God's going to give a lot more. He's going to exceed your wildest dreams. Now, the prosperity gospel preachers, they'll tell you, well, just send us $50 and, God will take care of you. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about a self-serving. Like, we really can't, if we seek that generosity of God as the main goal, it's not going to work.
That's right.
We have to truly give out of genuine generosity, regardless of the outcome. Even if God doesn't bless me, I'm still going to give.
That's right.
That's the attitude.
That's right.
And if we go into it with that kind of attitude of, regardless of whether or not God provides for me, I'm still going to give, of course, knowing that God is going to provide. He will never abandon us. But when God sees that kind of detached generosity, regardless of what's in it for us, then He will bless us.
That's right. And it might not be in the way that we're hoping for or the way that we are expecting. And even in those situations, it's often better than we were hoping for or expecting. And then another thing, we're also not talking about generosity strictly with money and strictly with your financial earnings and your financial givings and that which you can have a tax write-off for. Yeah. We're also talking about generosity with our time, generosity with helping others, and growing in friendship in many cases, or just helping those less fortunate because they don't know how to change their oil, they don't know how to change a flat tire, etc.
Can I just share an example of how both generosity with time and God's blessing with money kind of came into relationship to one another? Yeah. So one time when I was in college, an elderly lady reached out to my parents and said, we're really lonely, like, and I really want to tell my story to somebody and have them write it down for me. And so my mom said, well, this lady's looking for help, and I said, well, I'll go talk to her and I'll write down her story or whatever she wants to say. So I went over to their house, and, they were just a very frail old couple. And she kind of told me some story from her childhood or something, and I wrote it down, took notes, and she was just so thankful for that. I don't know why she wanted to get it out, but the point is she wanted someone to pay attention to her, so I did. And I just kind of forgot about it.
Sure.
And then it was maybe a month or two later, I was paying college tuition at the time and working to pay for that. And the bill for my college was come due.
Yeah.
And I think it was like $300 or something. I was pretty, which was a lot to me as a poor college student.
I know it.
And so I was praying desperately, like I was at work, stressed out. And when I was just praying, like, God, like, please, I don't know how I'm going to pay this bill. It's really like, I don't have any money in the bank. What am I going to do? Yeah. Please provide for me, please, just in whatever way you see fit. And the place where I was working at the time had a P.O. box for each of the employees. So I went down and checked the P.O. box. And there was this personal card in there, and I opened it up. And it was from the elderly lady that I went and visited. And it was a very sweet note. She said, thank you so much for your time. I really love talking to you and getting to know you. And here's $300 just as a thank you.
Wow.
And it was exactly what I needed. Like the bill was due like the next day at school. Wow. And God provided the exact amount that I needed through this elderly lady. So my act of generosity at the time that I didn't even really think about.
Sure.
God used that to provide for me exactly when I needed it.
How providential.
So, yeah.
That's really wonderful. And then another thing that comes to mind of what the world teaches that's in contrast to what the church teaches is the generosity of children, right?
Yeah.
So being generous with children, and my goodness, when it comes to having kids, you are going to be required to give of your time and to give of yourself. But the world is, 2 kids, and then we're done.
Yeah.
And then you're in control. You're still in control. You can still do man-on-man defense. We're not turning to zone defense and and having more individuals coming at us than we have prepared arms to handle. But I think that we're constantly, and I guess that's what I'm trying to get at here, is that the world is very contrary. We have to make an active decision to have multiple kids beyond 2 or 3, for those of us, of course, who are capable.
But there's a interesting parallel there. But I love words, and I see a relationship between the words generous and generation, producing offspring. Generation and generous in the sense of fruitfulness.
Yeah.
Love is fruitful.
Amen.
Whether that's in acts of service to others or in bearing children.
That's right.
Even when you may be uncertain about the future or how but trusting in the Lord, trusting in God's provision and God's providence, taking that step of faith.
That's right. And so the church has an outlook for generosity that is greater than what the world presents, right? The church's outlook and Christ's teaching on generosity is the path to purpose and the path to happiness. And so I think it's important for us to dive in and talk more about what it is that the church presents and suggests or directs, as a generous life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, again, as we've kind of talked about throughout this episode, that our generosity is founded on the generosity of God. Generosity is reciprocity.
Yeah.
You receive from God, you give thanks for that gift, and then you return the gift. That is the whole action of the spiritual life. That's the action of the Mass, really. We're taking these gifts that God has given us, bread and wine, the kind of the fruit of our human labor, I guess, but they're based on the gifts of the earth that God has given to us. and we're sanctifying those, blessing those, and then returning them to God in thanksgiving. That's why the Eucharist means thanksgiving. We receive the gifts and we return them to God in thanksgiving. And so there's kind of a circular motion there where we receive from God and we give back to God our thanks and praise. I love the preface of the Mass, let us give thanks to the Lord our God. It is right and just. It is truly right and just. Our duty and our salvation, always and everywhere to give you thanks.
That's right.
And that's really what the heart of the spiritual life is receiving those gifts of God with gratitude and then giving back.
That's right.
Which is generous.
And we were made generous out of God's generosity, and we were loved out of God's love and God's generosity. And so it's built within the very fabric of our being.
Yeah.
And what we've been taught or what the world presents denies that character, that part of our being. And so it can't possibly give us happiness.
Right.
It can't possibly grow in that happiness. And so I do kind of like what you were talking about and give thanks to God, right? Because I know we've talked about the association with being grateful to generosity.
Yeah.
And that is a great practice that I know I've had to work on a lot, right? So my wife by nature is more generous. I know that my mom is incredibly generous as a person. But it's not, I loved seeing my bank account grow. I love seeing the numbers keep on going, and I'd give, I'd tithe, kind of the minimum, or, somewhere between 5 and 10% so that I could feel good about myself, but not enough to hurt that growing bank account. But it wasn't bringing me happiness. I wasn't looking at my bank account every day. I wasn't turning into Scrooge.
Yeah.
And so what I noticed is that the more I started practicing gratefulness, and I still practice it on a daily basis, it has not ended, but the more that I practice gratefulness, the more that you are just in awe at what God has blessed you with.
Yeah.
And gratefulness, you start seeing, is being grateful for things outside of money. And you're grateful for things almost completely opposite to money, and that which is family, and that which is love, and that which is friends, and that which is beauty of the trees and the sky and the mountains. And so when we turn our hearts and our minds to gratefulness in our everyday life, and we don't focus on counting the cost, is it growing my bank account? We grow in our being, in our essence, in generosity. Yeah.
And generosity too in the spiritual life can often be related to going beyond the bare minimum.
Yeah.
I mean, generosity, it's true across the board, go beyond the bare minimum. But for example, the church asks very little of us.
Right.
But there are some people who, are content to say, I'll go to, I'll receive the Eucharist on Christmas and Easter. I'll just begrudgingly go to Mass the rest of the week.
Yeah.
I'll go to confession, once or twice a year because that's the minimum. I'll fast during Lent, I guess, but that's it. Or they're just checking the boxes of the very least that the church requires of us. And once they've done that, they're content.
Yeah.
But generosity says, no, I'm going to go beyond the bare minimum.
Yeah.
I'm going to seek ways to give back to God beyond, Mother Teresa, like you said, about giving until it hurts. She talked about how the importance of giving until it hurts, because until there's some discomfort there, it's hard to say that it's genuine generosity.
Yeah, and Venerable Fulton Sheen also said, don't count how much you've given, by how much you've passed along, but how much you have left.
Right.
And, and we could go through church fathers of the past that'll make us cringe by, every extra pair of shoes you have, St. Basil, and every extra jacket you have. But they're trying to get to this point of that unless we are comfortable doing without so that others can have, we're always going to be attached to the things of this world. We're going to always be attached to delicious scotch and pipes and things of this world. And so we have to remove ourselves from that attachment.
Yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of our lack of generosity, our fear of generosity is rooted in just that fear. We're just afraid that if I don't take care of myself, God won't take care of me. But St. Paul says, that God, who did not spare His own Son for us, will He not also with His Son freely give us all things?
Yeah.
And we need to have that confidence, that faith, that trust in God.
Yeah.
That if we act radically, He will act radically to care for us.
That's right.
And the lives of the saints are perfect testimonies to that, because sometimes they didn't know from minute to minute how they were going to survive. They didn't know where their food was coming from, where their shelter was. I've always admired, I couldn't do it, but I've always admired the Capuchin Franciscans, and their original, I'm not sure if they still do it or not, but their original commitment was they weren't going to keep more than like one meal on hand at any given time, and they were just going to trust God for wherever their food would come from next. And obviously they're still around, so God provided.
He did.
But still, that radical commitment to dependence on God.
That's right. What an example. And I think a cornerstone of generosity is also the reminder that it's done in communion with others. So when we are generous, we are uniting ourselves with God. We are growing in that union and that communion with God. When we are generous with others, we are uniting and offering that generosity and that charity and that love and that respect for them, whatever the case might be, with others. And it's also helping us grow heart and mind, right? It's also helping us connect the fullness of our being and bring that community. So it's always pouring forth. It's also a virtue that unifies ourselves with God and unifies ourselves with others.
Yeah, and generosity to others, and we don't know necessarily how this works spiritually, but Christ promises us that it does, that what you did to the least of these, you did to me. And that I don't really want to call it a parable, but when Jesus was saying, at the final judgment, He will ask us what we did. We loved you, Lord. We served you. Well, did you serve the poor? Did you serve those who are in prison? Did you clothe the naked? Well, no. Well, then you didn't do it to me. You really didn't love me. And, to those who did, they said, when did we serve you, Lord? When you served those who were poor, those who were needy, those who did not have, you were doing that to me. That service was to me. And so when we serve others, we are serving Christ in a mysterious way. And how horrible would we feel if Christ came to us in disguise, someone asking for our charity, and we denied that to them, and come to find out it was Christ Himself, and we turned away and justified that for whatever reason. And then someday we found out, so we have to take that call to generosity seriously.
I completely agree. And so, we're talking about service and service towards others, but we would be doing a disservice if we didn't bring up the Catechism of the Catholic Church. And so we know that in the Catechism, generosity is brought up, I believe, 10 times. It's mentioned, and of those 10 times, 5 of the 10, so half of them, are generosity with choosing life. And so how important is that? To be generous as a married couple with life and choosing life, and be it obviously natural procreation or adoption and these sort of things. That is one of the ultimate signs of generosity. And I know that we both talked about it, both of us, me with 5 kids running around, and you with 4 and 1 on the way, that we're doing our best to be generous, but it's not easy. And, we're often at deep prayer and often in need of counsel, to maintain that generosity. But I can say with all of my kids that it's on a daily basis. I look for them and I'm grateful for the lives that God has given me, and I'm grateful for their presence in my life, even the fact that I don't get to do what I want to do a lot of the times because they're there. But I think and it's also important to know that the church is not ever prescribing or directing that every single family that's capable of having children needs to have 10 or 12 or 13 or 14 kids, right? But you are called to generosity. You are called to discernment with God and with your spouse. And maybe it's just one more child,
Yeah, and serving those in your home is where generosity starts.
That's right.
Mother Teresa, she talked about kind of the affluent West, and she talks about, yes, we do see homeless people here and there occasionally, but not like in the slums of India, where so often, like in Calcutta, where there's just miles and miles of cardboard shacks that people are living in. And so she said, well, the way you can love people in the West is to answer that hunger for love.
Yeah.
And often that starts in your own home. She said, you want to help the world, she said, go home and love your family.
Yeah.
And that's an act of generosity. The sacrifice of your time and attention to those that God has placed under your care is an act of generosity. It can often be very demanding.
Yeah, it's so true.
So we can't just calculate generosity based on a dollar amount that we're giving, though that's important.
Agreed.
It can often be found in the love of those within our own home.
Yeah, so Sam and I call all Catholic gentlemen to that beginning or deepening of generosity is start at home.
Yep.
Start with those closest to you.
Right.
Start with your wife and your children, and make it an intentional, direct act of giving of your time or giving of your presence and attention.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. It's like concentric circles. The bullseye on the target is your home, and then everything else that overflows from that is what we're called to.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I agree.
Well, we're going to end today's episode with our nightcap, as usual, and that is going to be today a dopp kit. If you haven't heard of this is a dopp kit right here, and it's basically just a travel bag for your grooming things. I've got all kinds of things in here which I won't take out and show you, but they're essentially a great way to keep a handle on all of your things, much better than a Ziploc bag.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
And there's something really masculine about a leather dopp kit or travel bag, as I ignorantly was walking around calling them. I have a leather one as well, which I didn't bring here, but there really is. It's a great way. You know it's going to last. You know it's not going to disappear. You're not going to have to, like a nylon one or so that's going to get ripped, or the zipper's going to break real quick. So investing in one of those can add a degree of masculinity and a degree of, I'd say, joy and appreciation towards something nice.
Yep. This is waxed canvas and leather, and it's gone thousands of miles with me, and I really appreciate it. So if you don't have one, get one. I think you'll enjoy it.
Yeah. So thank you for being here, and as we always remind ourselves and our viewers, be a man, be a saint.